Good morning. Good morning, 7:30 Saturday, and walking the dog, getting a bit of fresh air and daylight exposure first thing in the morning, as I have preached about before in many of my videos. The other week when I did a strength session for cyclists video, didn't actually specify much in the way of upper body exercises at all. And the reason for that is, to state the obvious, cycling is a lower body dominant sport, and you will get most of your benefits from a cycling performance perspective from lower body strength exercises. However, oh, look at that sky. However, there is a lot of rationale for why you should include some upper body lifts as cyclists. Away from the performance benefits for a little while, first of all, it's going to counteract the kind of onset of this typical kind of cyclist posture. A lot of long-time cyclists tend to have very rounded shoulders. They tend to have very bad posture, and especially those who, and if you're listening to this, if you've got a desk job where you spend a lot of your time in this very anterior dominant position, to try and do some other exercises to try and mitigate that that posture is going to be very beneficial for you in the long term. Another benefit is injury prevention. In the event of a crash, whether that be on road or off road, often you put your hands out to protect yourself, and if you aren't very strong and you aren't very tied together, and on all your tendons, your ligaments are weak, then they will much more easily tear, they will much more easily snap and pull on things which will cause injury. Not only all that, but also there's some performance benefit as well, more so for the disciplines which require a little bit more technical skill. So for example, mountain biking and cyclocross. But even in road, when you're sprinting, for example, or when you're climbing, there's a lot of rationale for why upper body strength will translate to the power on the pedals. So for example, when you're yanking on the bars, the transfer of that power through the arms, through the core, into the lower body is quite a big aspect to developing force on the pedals. Anyway, without further ado, I will finish walking the dog, go home, grab a little snack, and then we'll head to the gym. So I'll see you there. So in the previous video, when I talked about strength exercises for cyclists, I mainly went over some lower body lifts. But in that video, I talked a little bit about how pairing exercises up is a good method in the gym. Now, what I didn't touch on is what those other exercises are that you pair the lower body exercise up with. So that's what today's about. So if you haven't already watched the previous video about the strength exercises of cyclists, because that's kind of the main lifts. So keeping with the same theme as the lower body exercises, what we want to do is we want to keep the upper body exercises fairly compound. So what we mean by compound is moving lots of different muscle groups, lots of different segments of our body at the same time, because they are going to give us the biggest kind of strength component and applicable strength that we want. What we don't want to be doing is going into the gym and doing something like bicep curls or tricep extensions, because that's not going to have a good kind of transferable performance benefit. And that being said, there is 4 different movement patterns we're looking for. That is a horizontal push, a horizontal pull, and then a vertical push and a vertical pull. So we're going to start off with what will be a horizontal push, which is bench press. With regards to sets and reps, keep them as low as possible, just like when in the last video. kind of aiming for anywhere between 4 to 8 reps, and that'll keep the strength component quite high and hopefully keep the hypertrophic component quite low. So for bench press, obviously you need the bench, and then you have the barbell racked on there on the supports, which is about the height where you can get it off easily with your hands with a little bit of extension in the arm, but you still want it fairly high. You don't want to have to be finishing that last rep and then lowering it down slowly onto the catchments. Take a grip which is just slightly wider than shoulder width apart. Specifically for mountain bikers, you can even take a grip which is exactly the width of your bar if you need to be, and then lower the weight down slowly and press it back up again. So the critical point here is that every rep you should lower it down fairly slowly to your chest. It should stop just before your chest, and then you should press up as powerfully as you possibly can. You'll note that on this set I'm doing about 6 reps, I think. Yeah, I'm on 80 kilos here, but select an appropriate weight so that you're anywhere between that kind of 6 to 8 to 10 rep range. Seeing from another angle there, you'll see that every rep I'm going down for roughly the count of 2 and then pressing up for the count of 1 or 2. Nice controlled movement patterns, no arching of the back, and all the form for every single rep is the same. For all of you endurance warriors who are jumping out at the computer screens and saying you don't do strength training for endurance performance for your upper body because you'll just put on muscle and you'll decrease your watts per kilo on the bike because of the extra bulk that you're putting on. Firstly, it's very unlikely, due to the other type of training that you do, that you're going to put on any muscle. You're not going to be putting yourself in an anabolic state where you can build muscle tissue very easily at all, unless you're on drugs. And also, if you're very savvy with how you apply the strength training in terms of the volume that you do, which I'll talk about in this video, it's also, you're not putting yourself in a state where you're going to build much muscle, you're just going to get strong. So mainly we keep the volume down, we limit ourselves to 2 or 3 sets, and rep ranges no more than 6-8 reps. Focus on the strength component and only include it roughly twice a week, something like that. Obviously I'm not a good example of this because I'm just so gifted that I just put on loads and loads of muscle mass on my upper body. Yeah, so I put on absolutely bugger all muscle on my upper body, even though I do upper body lifting 3 times a week and push them to maximal effort. But what I'm finding is that the weights that I'm lifting in the gym are going up, and I am getting a lot stronger week on week, even though I'm not putting on much size, if any size whatsoever, which is what I'm wanting. Exercise number 2, then we go for a vertical pull, and in this example I'm doing body weight chin-ups. So I've got my hands fairly narrow there, and I'm pulling my body weight up all the way through to full flexion where my chin is higher than my hands. Now I do a set of 10 here, and I do 3 sets of 10, and that's an appropriate weight. Once I can do more than 10, then I'll start to load it up with a plate on my feet. But yeah, that's my example here of vertical pull. Other exercises which would be a vertical pull would be something like a lat pull down machine, where you've got your hands a lot wider. But in this example, my hands are fairly narrow. Then we go on to the vertical push. Out of all of the exercises, this is probably one of the least specific for cyclists, and it makes sense to prioritize more of a horizontal push and a horizontal pull. But yeah, we're just doing a dumbbell shoulder press here. So yeah, we're just doing, I think I was doing reps of 10 on here. with 25k. Again, nice slow controlled movement patterns, and making sure that both of the dumbbells go up in sequence to each other. When you use dumbbells like this and both of your hands are independent of each other, it really does bring out any kind of discrepancies you've got between right and left arms. So make sure you don't try and push the weight too much on this if you're new to it. Start light and then you can build from there. For the last exercise, we're doing a horizontal pull. Now, horizontal pull is probably the most beneficial of all of the different movement patterns for cyclists, and this is the one that really kind of counteracts that typical cyclist posture. It's also the one that will develop most strength and power, which is relatable on the bike, such as pulling on the bars. Now, for this example, I'm actually using a machine which I don't often use when I'm doing strength and conditioning, but because this was towards the end of my session and I was starting to fatigue, I wanted to make sure that I had good form. So you'll see here, I think this is a Cybex T row machine. I grab the handles pretty wide and then basically pull my elbows back, keeping them fairly close to my body, and then I'm also really stretching my lats at the bottom of the movement. It's great for your lats, your upper traps, all your rhomboids and everything, and the upper back. A alternative to this exercise where you're not using a machine, which arguably is a much better exercise, would be a bent over barbell row or a bent over dumbbell row. I actually finished this session off with some dips, which is another example of a vertical push. So similar to the shoulder press with the dumbbells, vertical push, but obviously we're pushing the other way. So this is more of a chest dominant exercise and tricep dominant exercise as opposed to shoulders. But again, big compound exercise, which is using multiple muscles at the same time to create that movement. As ever, thank you very much for watching my video. I have put a bit of extra effort in the last couple of weeks to do kind of a series of strength specific videos, so I'm hopefully they give you a good insight into what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing when you're in the gym over winter. Now, as we transition into February, that is the end of my personal kind of strength block. I will still be doing plenty of strength and conditioning, but there's not as much of an emphasis on it for me as I kind of increase the volume and the quality on the bike. So yeah, there'll be less strength videos coming up the next few weeks and more cycling specific videos, hopefully. Are you reading your books? Are you reading your books? Are you reading your books? Until next time, please like and subscribe to the channel. Like this video. It does give me a bit more incentive to make more. And see you again next time.